By the 1st century AD, Rome was a continental power that had already absorbed Greece, Spain, and North Africa. The empire functioned as a hyper-organized expansionist machine, systematically incorporating new trade possibilities and tax revenue as it moved. The engine of this expansion was the infantry cohort. Unlike traditional phalanxes, these smaller units of 80 to 160 men were highly mobile. They relied on swordsmanship rather than spears, allowing them to envelop and ambush enemies with speed that older, more rigid armies couldn't match. Aggressive tactics required specialized protection, specifically the scutum. This large rectangular shield gave a legionary mere total body coverage, shielding everything from his chin to his shins. Roman dominance relied on the standardization of this equipment. When these shields locked together, soldiers became part of a single, impenetrable wall of wood and iron that allowed the line to advance as one unit. This diagram shows the legion's geometric mechanics. They formed the tortoise, an armored box blocking overhead fire. To break lines, they shifted into a wedge, shattering ranks. If surrounded, they formed a hollow square, holding a 360-degree perimeter. Every one of these maneuvers has a strict environmental prerequisite: wide, flat, open space. To execute these shifts, the unit needs room to move and a clear line of sight. In 9 AD, this space-dependent machine marched into an environment where geometry was physically impossible. 3 full legions, roughly 20,000 men, marched in, and none of them came out. The architect of this disappearance was Arminius. He was a Germanic tribal chief, but he had also been a Roman citizen and a trained officer in the Roman military. This dual identity was the Romans' undoing. Arminius understood the mechanics of the legions perfectly, including their absolute reliance on terrain that allowed for cohesive formations. He exploited the Roman mindset of aggressive expansion by feeding commanders false reports of a rebellion in the north. He knew the Romans would move quickly to suppress any threat to their new territory. To reach the supposed rebellion, Arminius convinced the Roman governor to take a shortcut. The army left the paved roads and marched directly into the Teutoburg Forest. Arminius had engineered a scenario that systematically deconstructed the tactical environment the Romans needed to function. The reality of the forest was immediate: dense trees, uneven soil, and thick mud. There was no room for a cohort to stand shoulder to shoulder, let alone form a wedge or a square. The trees forced the army to unspool. A cohesive fighting force of 20,000 men was stretched into a thin, vulnerable, single-file line that was several miles long. When the torrential rain began, Arminius triggered the ambush. Germanic warriors swarmed from the tree line, attacking the isolated segments of the Roman lines simultaneously. The Romans were trapped in the mud. They could not form defensive squares because they were too strung out, and they could not use their shields effectively because the trees physically blocked their movements. At the Kalkriese archaeological site in Germany, researchers have spent decades uncovering the physical evidence of this mechanical breakdown. One find at the site reveals a specific horror: the iron plates of a Roman legionary's armor. Because the soil is acidic, his body rotted away long ago, but the metal remains, including the iron shackles used by the victors to bind his hands and neck. Inside the forest, Roman technology and discipline were useless. The environment had stripped the legions of their geometry, leaving the individual soldiers isolated and exposed. The total annihilation of 3 legions caused a panic in the capital. The Emperor Augustus was reportedly so distraught that he refused to cut his hair for months, famously shouting for the return of his lost legions. This disaster forced a permanent change in Roman strategy. The empire officially abandoned the goal of conquering all of northern Europe and halted its expansion at the Germanic frontier. The Roman military transitioned from a machine of conquest to a machine of consolidation. The goal was no longer to move the border forward, but to hold it exactly where it was. This led to the construction of the Limes Germanicus. It was a massive border defense system that eventually included 350 miles of walls, 60 major forts, and over 900 watchtowers. These fortifications became the permanent edge of the Roman world. The retreat from the Teutoburg Forest fixed the northern limits of the empire, creating a static divide between the Roman Mediterranean and the Germanic north that would persist for the rest of Rome's history.